Well, hey.
Hi.
Hello, everybody.
Just starting to panic then. Just starting to panic.
Oh. I think we're game to proceed with this. So welcome, everybody, and welcome to this Catalyzing the Future panel. I'm the moderator for this short discussion amongst giants. We have four incredible panelists, four incredible minds here, and moderating this and trying to get everybody's discussion in within 40 minutes is going to be completely impossible. So I'm going to be quiet and just introduce myself as Nigel Thurlow. I am the creator of Scrum, the Toyota Way, and also the co-creator of something called the Flow System. But my role today is to help you bring your opinions across. I'm going to ask you all to make a very rapid 1-minute introduction. I'm going to start with Andy because she's sitting right next to me. Andy, welcome. You're on mute. Can't hear you, Andy. So while you sort that out, let's jump to Ellen. Ellen, let's bring you in for a quick introduction.
All right. Ellen Grace Henson, marketing mechanics, inventor of the Wheel of Value, alignment, think tank, and more.
Keep going, Ellen.
You can hear me now.
So I help clients, I help companies of all sizes help ensure that they are customer-centric, employee-centric, and wildly successful in delivering value to their customers.
Whoa. So, Andy, let's cut back to you and get your introduction. I can hear some music. But Andy, if you can give us your introduction without the music.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, perfectly. I think Andy's having some troubles. Ilkka, let's bring you in. Ilkka, you're in Finland. Let's learn a little bit about you, if we can do.
Yes, my name is Ilkka Kakko, and my colleagues call me Ike, or sometimes they call me with my Twitter name, which is Serendipitor. I live in Finland, countryside, but I work globally, mostly on developing innovation environments. I work with science and technology parks in developing in Europe. I have been an advocate for three things: for serendipity thinking, for post-normal era, which we, by the way, are entering now very rapidly, and VUCAbility, where VUCAbility is the ability to prosper in VUCA conditions, so volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous world where we are now. And I wish I can bring some Scandinavian and Finnish perspective to this discussion. Thanks for the invitation.
Absolutely, Ilkka.
Is the music off?
Andy, the music's off. That's perfect. What a great segue. Andy, say hello to everybody who's listening in.
Oh, God.
You can't hear me. Martin, would you like to jump in while we figure out what until Andy can hear us? Martin, you're the best dressed amongst us.
Well, I made an effort. I put a shirt on instead of the usual scruffs. Yeah, I'm Martin Knox. I have a one-liner because it's been difficult. Yeah, it's been difficult for me to describe what it is that I do. I was at an event some years ago, and there was someone wanted to meet me, and I knew of this person's reputation. She had a very particular reputation. Anyway, I saw this vision being wheeled across the room to me, and she came to me, we shook hands, and she stood up a little bit taller, and she looked down her nose at me and she said, "Hey, what do you do then?" And before I could even think, I said, "It's difficult to describe what it is that I do, but I'm fucking good at it. I have a one-liner. I work with leaders and their organizations to help them find, articulate, and deliver their truth."
Wow,
So
that's a wonderful introduction. And so we've lost Andy, but I think she's sorting out her technical problems. We'll come back in. So I'm going to press on. So today we're going to discuss a few ideas. I've got a few ideas to probably discuss with you as a panel, but the focus really is what can we do rather than just what we think today. So not just theories and academia, but some practical suggestions from those who are looking for us. Andy, can you hear us? Can we hear you? No. Your microphone isn't working. No.
Can you hear me now?
Oh, yes, perfect. Don't do anything. Touch nothing. Please just quickly.
Is agility at its best?
This is a shallow dive into chaos, which is perfect for this
I'm
panel.
so sorry. I had no idea where the music was coming from. I couldn't figure out anything. I shut down. Shall we continue? I don't want to interrupt us. Where were we?
No, Andy, we were just about to move to a first question, but please, in sort of 20 words or less, tell us who you are.
I'm an agile corporate anthropologist, figuring out how to solve complex problems to help organizations change and the people inside them. Change is terribly painful and nobody likes me, but I'm here. So I'd love to talk today about business and agility. Thank you for having me and being patient.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. And for everybody's benefit, she is an award-winning author as well. She's a wonderful person. I enjoyed talking to her the other day in great detail. So we're just saying that we want to try and give some practical advice today as to what people can take away from this. And my first sort of supposition to you all is normal an illusion? We keep talking about this new normal, but was there ever an old normal? What is normal anyway? I don't know. Who wants to pick that up and run with it? Martin.
Sorry. It's a word I want to ban because it's utterly meaningless. Normal. What does it mean? It is entirely contextual, and it's in here. It doesn't exist anywhere else. My supposed normal is completely different to somebody else's. This massive rush to business, getting back to business as normal.
Ilka, take it and run with it. Mute off and grab it.
We're looking for the familiar, and we're coming out into the world and not finding it. There's no normal. There never has been.
Martin, hold that thought. Ilka, what do you want to add?
That's why, Martin, that's why I call it this time what we are living now, post-normal, when nothing is normal anymore. So that's kind of my understanding about normal or not normal. But this is post-normal. And of course, we have very many fundamental changes going on now, which we will talk maybe in a minute.
I can see Ellen is eager to grab hold of those thoughts. Ellen.
Well, so normal is actually a mathematical concept. It's similar to average, and I agree with Martin and Ilka. In a concrete sense, it doesn't exist. It's just a way we simplify the world to give ourselves some comfort. There's always chaos. There's always change. So we want to be careful about getting too comfortable with any particular situation. When we talk about business and agility, we really want to structure our work to support change. The markets change around us, the worlds change around us, and we want to have the structure in our work and in our relationships to be able to respond effectively and positively to that change.
I think that was good. And Andy, what do you want to add to that?
So let's get a little bit of the neurosciences in here. The way our brain works is it takes data and information and it creates a story. And by the time you hit 25 or 30, you have a pretty good illusion of reality. And once you have that story in your head, we live our stories, you only see the things that conform to that story. And our amygdala loves to hijack anything. It fears it, it flees it, it appeases it. But the oldest reptilian part of the brain hates the unfamiliar. And so consequently, you don't see anything. And if you don't see it, we decide with the heart and the eyes, and then the brain comes in. And so whether Martin is right, there's no normal or it's a new normal, what we're looking for is what the brain wants, which is certainty. It wants autonomy. It wants us to be able to have fairness and relatedness. We want to be social. I'm an anthropologist, but at the end of the day, the brain is hating what's going on now. It just wants to do the same habits it's always had that worked. Well, it's not going to work anymore. So now how do we change the story to come up with a new one that'll help us see a new post-normal? But we're going to look for something that gives us certainty. I passed.
No, that was good because there was a comment from the audience saying if you're always focusing on normal, you're always catching up, which was and you have a fan out there as well, Andy, who's put a comment in while we're talking as well. So somebody's just saying, Richard Merrick's saying normal is an anchor in the past. So if we start looking, because we are all agilists and we sort of work in this sort of business consulting world and helping teams and helping people, and we're starting to want people to focus on something that isn't just normal standard average. One of the things I've been talking about a lot as an agilist, and a lot of the people I talk to, is about teamwork. And of course, agile folks are always talking about individuals and interactions over processes and tools. Well, as we move into this sort of post-COVID world, if we want to call it that, and we focus more on human factors and team science, I've sort of looked at all the frameworks out there, and they all talk about you need a team. Teams are awesome, but they don't actually teach you how to be a team and what teamwork really is. And we've got some really eminent people on this panel who are very focused on this. And of course, Andy, you're an anthropologist. So this is right in your course. So I'm going to start with you in a minute by asking this question. What thoughts have you got on effective teamwork in this virtual and rapidly changing world? Andy?
Well, I heard some research recently that all the folks from one of the large consulting businesses were all struggling with belonging and well-being. So humans are herd animals. We're most comfortable in social settings with others who look like us, talk like us, share our stories, and affirm to our brain that we're safe. Now the problem is that team has all kinds of different stories going on. They're all living remotely. They're dealing with it differently. And there's no platform for actually communicating over that, proverbial water cooler. And we haven't got new methods for sharing. And so we really don't know what our teammates are doing. So we make it up. And in the absence of their stories, we're creating new ones, which makes that team an illusion that we're trying to work with. And the fraction is a very interesting one because we have to rise to the occasion. We're like EMTs or a firehouse, and we have to know how to perform. We need a checklist. But if you think what airplane pilots do, they go through their checklist. Good surgeons go through their checklist. Now everything is without a checklist. So it's a very interesting time for creating a new normal with new rules, new checklists, new how-tos. But if you don't do it together, you're all going to be making up your own stories, and it'll be such fun, but nobody will know what to do. So I pass my baton.
Who wants to pick that up? Martin?
Well, Andy, you used the word earlier on that really, really struck me. People looking for sameness.
Yes.
And that's I suppose that's key. Something that we can identify and recognize. Something that it goes beyond the familiar.
Yes.
Perhaps I don't know where I'm going with this. So, Ellen.
Are you familiar with the theme of willful blindness?
Oh, yeah.
So what you described,
I'm very good at it.
We willfully don't see stuff that doesn't fit. And however you want to share it, you do some marvelous work bringing teams together to be innovative and creators. And I bet you bring diverse teams together to do that. Because you're all pulling all those ideas into a new bucket and shaking it up. Like you have some wonderful approaches to how to build those teams.
Ellen, I think you wanted to add something there before we bring Ilka in. You were hovering there with a comment.
I always have. I mean, this is such an exciting conversation. It's hard to not want to, jump in and participate. It's interesting. There's two really critical failure points for teams, amongst many, but two critical failure points is a lack of clear goals and then a lack of alignment around those goals. So what breaks down oftentimes in the focus on individual performance is an understanding, something that's central to all of us that we can build our goals around. And in my work, I help my clients focus on their customer as central to the company and central to the performance of all teams. And then an appreciation and an understanding of what everybody brings to ensure the success of those goals, to ensure the success of the teams. I've been in tech for a long time, and I've worked with companies of all different types. And one of the things I see commonly is kind of a hierarchy, right? A hierarchy of value. Or even recently, I heard somebody say only sales and engineering contribute to revenue. Everybody else is overhead. That shows a fundamental misunderstanding of what it takes to deliver an awesome experience for your customers. It shows a fundamental disrespect for the work that everybody else in the company does. And it's probably one of the key drivers of why we have such a low engagement of employees throughout the world.
It's fundamental to the problems in the world right now. Sorry, Ilka.
Ilka, please come in.
I would like to highlight one of the, I would say, challenges in teamwork, and it's in the very beginning, and I think it's the team formation. How you formate teams, how you pick up the team members and this kind of stuff. And I think this sameness and I said like domain-specific knowledge is mostly important or seen important, mostly important thing. But you might miss some other things like how some member of the team can bring some inspiration, different perspectives, this kind of things. And me being an advocate of serendipity, I like to see this kind of unexpected combinations of competencies to emerge. So unexpected combinations of competencies, that's something which I'm trying to get. And when I work with the ecosystem development and ecosystems, where there are a lot of free agents, so we can kind of formate teams which are more about the gravity of the idea and how the idea itself attracts people to work with that kind of idea. So it's a different kind of environment than in I would say, real enterprise environment. But I think this is one key element which has been missing team formation principles.
I'm sorry, Andy, please go ahead.
No, I'm listening. We have a lot of higher education institutions as our clients. And as soccer became a metaphor for how you live life, the faculty were having a terrible time with students who would only do things together in teams. And that often meant very poor performance because they knew how to play together on soccer, but not how to get things done together. And I think that's pretty much what you see in many organizations. Just a little side note to that, we have a leadership academy for a healthcare institution, and we're working on followership now. And we're talking less about teams because they're all working in different places and more about how to get leaders and followers to get results collaboratively, because the team needs all of those. To your point, Ellen, they need the general manager as well as the players. So some interesting observations going on how these actually work at least in our clients.
So I'll bring you in a second, Martin, because I was just listening to some of the comments and I was reading some of the comments on the screen, and a lot of people are sort of echoing some of the thoughts in their questions. Sai, our great founder and backer in the background, was going yes, yes, yes in the chat window, which nobody else can see, by the way. It's just for the panelists. And somebody was asking about team size in virtual teams, and there's a lot of science about team size and about when we study the sort of size of teams and their effective, be able to have shared mental models, cognitions, work together, etc., etc. And I won't go too deeply into that. And I think all the rules apply to team size, whether it's virtual or remote, but then or together, but the rules of collaboration and working together, they change when you're in this virtual environment. We have to make that extra effort, which brings me, and Martin, I'll bring you in immediately on this next point, is when we start to think about teams and members of a team, there's this whole concept of expertise and great expertise. And I was described by Dave Snowden, the Cynefin framework creator, as a great generalist. And I like that label. So is a generalist more valuable than an expert, especially in this new world? Or is there such a thing as an expert generalist? Martin, do you want to take us off on this one?
The experts have been vilified for the past, few years. And of course we need experts. And experts on occasion have been communicating very badly. The expert in her field can come over as very narrow in perspective. Of course you can have an expert generalist. The experts are still needed. The expert generalist can call upon the expertise of the expert. and put different aspects of expertise together in new ways. This is what we have to do, to face the challenges that we're facing.
Yep.
And I could go on and on and on. So I'm going
Somebody
to
save him from going on and on and on and jump in. Who wants to follow
Ellen.
Martin?
Well, I have a new book coming out, and of the 10 stories in there, one woman is a subject matter expert. And as we dug into the myths around roles, she was quite happy being a subject matter expert, being a specialist, and being called in to a team on the kinds of projects. MIT has some great research about assembling ad hoc teams of different folks with different expertise, and all of a sudden they'd have a problem to solve and did it extremely well, not even aware of how they did it. In a sense, they just came together with different ideas, and the subject matter expertise was shared in a way that allowed them to come to great resolutions and then disband. And so the question about what size team is a really profound one, as if we have an assumption based on the past, where things were being done inside companies, inside buildings, not ad hoc. I mean, there's all kinds of new rules to the new post-mortem normal. Did I say post-mortem?
Maybe it will be. Ellen, did you want to add something? Because I know Ilka's definitely got some serendipitous comments here, but Ellen, would you like to contribute?
There's so many points to address here. So many wonderful points. I want to, Nancy Kress, thank you for your comment, Nancy. She said something about there's a willful blindness around customers as part of the team. Yep. Customers need to be part of and at the center of the work we do in business. There was a study published in Harvard Business Review several months ago asking people where they spend the most of their time in their work and which part and what time are they spending that they think is the most valuable for their work. So people spend the most time working within their discipline, but they get the most value or they deliver the most value when they're working with people across other disciplines outside their discipline. That leads me then to Ilka's point about diverse perspectives leading to new insights. There's a lot of talk, of course, in business around innovation. And I find that in a lot of tech companies, the focus is on technical innovation. When you can get a cross-discipline team together, develop a shared understanding of the customer, help them articulate what the customer wants to accomplish at various points in that life cycle or the customer experience, and you're having this as a cross-discipline conversation, incredible synergies arise and incredible insights into better ways to collaborate to deliver that value, better ways to create that value. Innovation abounds. And it does take that comfort, that understanding that we're all bringing something to this space, and that respect for what people bring, and then that willingness to listen and to hear, to discover new ways to work more effectively together.
Ellen, there's so many amazing points you're making, which really lend themselves to my studies in team science. But Ilka, I'm really interested in that Finnish serendipitous a perspective that I know you bring on this point.
I hope it will be global perspective as well. But in a way, I would like to say about my good friend Kenneth Mikkelsen, who was writing a book about neo-generalists, and reading that, I got an insight and linking with the serendipity. I think it is that in many cases, the domain-specific experts are so deep in their specific theme, and they matter of understanding that they don't have this kind of serendipitous mindset, so they don't like surprises. So I feel like I work very closely, and I enjoy working with people who like surprises. And I think generalists have this kind of wider perspective to the world and to different specific themes and domains that they are not so much afraid about surprises, even bad surprises, which might turn out to be good surprises when you are prepared and you take them seriously. So here we come to the core of serendipity mindset. So how can you create an art of benefiting from unexpected. I think these experts, deep experts, that's difficult maybe for them. That's my, I don't know if it's Scandinavian, Finnish, or global perspective. I have been studying serendipity for more than 10 years, and this is kind of one of the understanding what I have got from there.
I can see Andy chomping at the bit to come in on there. Andy.
Well, the conversation is so personally rich and really important for business leaders to think about, because what you're leading to is how do you make decisions and how do you trust that you've made the right one? Because all too often the teams come together. I had a situation, won't mention which auto company, but they had a very collaborative culture. 30 people would come into a meeting and no decisions were ever made. They had a culture problem. It was so collaborative that it was great. Everybody had a voice, but nobody could make the decisions or trust that the right ones were made. And so there's that. And on the other side, I do a lot of work in healthcare, and the doctors fit into boxes. And so regardless of what symptoms you have, you must have rheumatoid arthritis, or you must have carpal tunnel, or you must have some box, because they can't see in a very serendipitous way what's actually your problem, because they only know the boxes and how to deal with it. So there are all kinds of implications here for how do you run a thriving business in fast changing times, not the least of which is all your certainties are uncertain. So cool conversation.
That's actually a very valid point about healthcare. I work with some professionals in the lean healthcare business, and I hear that particular statement all the time. Martin, I wanted to give you an opportunity to add something extra to this point if you want. We've probably got about 12 minutes left, so I want to move on to a final point. But Martin, I know you probably have some extra commentary on this.
Just very quick as I can. There's a number of questions around what constitutes a team. We're living in a very divisive society, or it has been, and teams are divided. You have a job title, you have a role, you have a function, you have a purpose, you have an expertise. Perhaps it's time for us to recognise the whole. I'm a beekeeper. That has massively informed what it is that I do. I was speaking with I'll be quick. I was speaking with a friend, and he was telling me about a board meeting he had about 4 months ago, and it was on Zoom. And for the first time ever, he saw his colleagues more in the round. He saw them in their own homes. The relationship shifted, and then something happened in the board meeting, and it was wonderful, and it shifted the dynamic again. The HR director, they were talking. The HR director looked over to one side, and she just said, "Will you stop doing that? You can't put sellotape around your brother's head. Now stop it." And then she came back to the meeting, and the dynamic had changed. The whole person, it wasn't the HR director sat on a bum in a boardroom. It was the whole person and where she was. Changed dynamic. And Simon said it was the most effective, swift meeting board meeting that they've ever had.
You're talking very much about humanizing the whole process there, and I'm fortunate. I'm working with a bank at the moment on a transformational journey, and human resources, their people are leading that transformational journey, or at least becoming leaders within that transformational journey. And this is really all about people. That is a focus of my work at the moment, this sort of key differentiator, this missing element in all the process focus methods and frameworks. They ignore the people, they give them a cursory nod, but they tend not to talk about them, which is a really a bit of a segue. Excuse me, shouldn't be coughing on mic, but some of the things you've been talking about, of course, we're sort of pulling ourselves out of chaos. We did this sort of not just a shallow dive, this deep dive into chaos in the last few weeks and months. And this should be a good topic to bring us to the end of this panel in the next 10 minutes is we always seem to be at our best, whether we're performing as individuals, especially as teams, within chaos, within calamity. When everything's sort of overwhelming and calamitous, we're all sort of suddenly able to do things we were never able to do before. So how can we remain in a state of crisis without being in a crisis? How can we continue to leverage the greatness that comes through when we're faced with calamity by continuing to thrive without being calamitous? Who wants to grab that? Ellen, let you start with. Oh, Martin wants to jump in. All right, Martin, run with that.
Well, I want to reframe your question a little bit, Nigel. How can we stay in a state of motivation
like that
without calamity? Because crisis can be very focusing and very motivating. If I don't do something about this now, things are going to fall apart. So we want to stay in that state of motivation without the adrenal load and the exhaustion that comes from crisis. And if I may, I'd also like to address a couple of things. Again, things that came through the chat, things that we've talked about a little bit about the way people are meeting today. Is that less human or less interactive than the opportunities we had to run into each other in the hallways, etc.? Unfortunately, I think some of the worst characteristics of meetings can be carried forward into the current circumstances. But to Martin's story, there's also, we see people so much more as human beings now. We see their environment. We hear their children. We hear their dogs. I mean, whatever it is. And we also, if we understand the opportunities in this format of communications, we need to bring more fun and humanity into our meetings. Fun increases creativity by 300%. And really making sure that we're not all just sitting here staid and listening and afraid to move in front of the camera, but that we can interact as human beings. And I bring music into some of my meetings. I bring, icebreakers, even with teams that have been working together for a long time. An icebreaker, a fun something to start a meeting off can be really beneficial at building those bonds and strengthening those bonds.
Ellen, I love the rephrasing. So, Martin, how can we stay in a state of motivation and get that 300% gain from happy, motivated people?
Recognize ourselves and recognize other. Acknowledge ourselves and acknowledge other. Be aware. I had an experience some years ago. I was driving back from the meeting. I don't get angry, but I was getting angry, and suddenly I was outside. My experience was of the observer and not the participant. And something really strange happened. I saw the anger pass, and I wasn't experiencing it. The way we experience things is I think it's bound into language. In Gaelic Irish, they have a situation. They have happiness on them. They wear sadness. It's something they can divest themselves of. We are sad. We are angry. It becomes a descriptor. It becomes a definition of the organism. To recognise that, to be able to become the observer rather than participant, I think for me it's been incredibly valuable.
Who would like, Andy or Ilka? I'd love to hear your perspective. Ilka, yes, please, and then we'll probably finish up with Andy before we have final thoughts. Ilka.
I think that's an interesting question, how to keep your motivation or even improve your motivation in sense of, crisis and that kind of thing. And of course, this sense of urgency, that has been always, the big driving force for situations like that. But I would like to highlight also especially in this new ecosystem environment and community building environment, this kind of sense of belonging. Where do you belong to? If you belong to a certain community, if you belong to a certain ecosystem, you will get a lot of power and empowerment and also inspiration from other people who are actually in the similar situation. But if you feel strongly that you belong to some sort of community which gives you power, and I'm not talking only within enterprises, but also in this kind of extended enterprise environments, which we are entering as well. So that the borders between the freelancers and the enterprises are mingling, so that enterprises start to use more and more freelancers. So this kind of sense of belonging to the ecosystem or community, I think they are very important in the future.
Yeah, that goes back to the earlier comments of herd, belonging, sameness, some of those things that were being mentioned earlier. Andy, Terry Nichols had an interesting comment about always requiring leadership. Well, I work very much in the world of collective leadership and within the team science sort of sphere. And really the individual members of a team become leaders. They take on leadership characteristics by demonstrating characteristics, etc. The team then start to provide collective leadership towards the organization. That's part of distributed leadership. Going to throw that in with any other comments you might have on what we've just spoken about. And
I'm teaching followership for one client, to your point, because the emphasis, leadership, if you Google leadership, there are 405 million responses. If you Google followership, there are 1 million. Tells you where we're focused. And it's a huge business. But a leader can't get anything done effectively without good followers. And we're not spending the time investing on those folks. Now, to your point, I'm a big believer in collaborative teams that can come up with good decisions, test them, and I'm a big tester because we never know if it's right or not, and trust each other for the moment. And they can rotate who the leader is. There are all kinds of ways of creating different kinds of collaborations, not always command and control. And I do think that, I'll say this a little quietly, the women leaders who I'm studying lead very collaboratively. They have good decisiveness, but they also have a good team that they pull together of the experts, subject matter experts. They listened, and all of the discussion, we just had an article published about this pandemic. Did the women do better than men for a reason? Well, they did it differently. And consequently, there's a whole lot of discussion about how men lead and women lead. But I do think we're on the brink of some very interesting possibilities about how to change how we get things done, assuming that's the point of a leader and followers. And I do think it could be quite exciting. My last thought, though, is not to be an anti-fragile, but habits are important for humans. And great athletes are very habit-driven. And I don't care if you're a golfer or you're doing the Tour de France or you're Drew Brees throwing the football. The habits take over. You don't have to think. And all of a sudden you are excelling. So let's make sure we keep habits and what those come and mean into this time when there are no habits that we can count on. And I do think that part of that post-normal is going to be finding the right set of new habits. My last thought.
So in the last sort of 90 seconds or 2 minutes of this, I'll add my final thought. Followers create leaders.
Yeah.
And there's actually, and there's a phrase that often says you get the leaders you deserve, but we'll just leave it as followers create leaders. Ellen, what final 20 seconds of thoughts might you have for the listeners?
You can lead from any chair. It's not just a title. And process versus people. If people are part of creating the process, if they have frameworks within which they can create effective process, then there's no contradiction between the two.
Wonderful thoughts. Martin, what would you like to add for the people who are listening for your final thoughts?
One word. Entelechy. Entelechy. So it's the realization of potential. I'm reading the description. The supposed vital principle that guides the development of and functioning of an organism or other system or organization. The soul.
Ilka, you have the last word of this panel. What would you like? I know you said vocability earlier. What would be your last thought as we say bye-bye to everybody? Ilka.
I think the good thing for everyone in these times would be to start to like surprises. So kind of learn to like surprises because you will have them a lot.
Panel, look, you are all awesome. We could have talked for 2 hours or more. Thank you to Sai, to Todd behind the scenes, to the organizers of Catalyzing the Future. thank you everybody for attending. I hope it was valuable for those listening. Thank you
Nigel,
everybody.
you are terrific, Nigel. Bravo,
Thanks,
Nigel.
Nigel. Thanks, Nigel.
Thank you. Bye bye everybody.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Awesome job.